Thanks, and find my talk and open it. So, yeah, I mean, you've given some science, a lot of science there, Mark. I'm going to give them more qualitative. You do the quant, I do the qual. I'm going to talk about some of the stories, maybe, that have come through in that time. So, mine is called, PD Dragons Back. Yeah, that one, exactly. So, if we open up, so I'm going to talk about peritoneal dialysis research across the dragons at back. There we go. Doesn't take too much to work out what that means, but I'll explain to you about it at the end, keep you on tenterhooks. So imagine this is the advance, and is this the advance? Maybe this is the advance.
I think we took it out.
Oh, we took it out. I'm going
to
press a button, and do I hear? Just press this instead. In the conventional way, maybe. I don't want to break it all, so when we get into the granular detail of how to work the laptop, then. Oh, good, that's lovely. Yeah, good. Oh, fine, yeah. So my slides are rather busy, I'm afraid, and the screen's quite small. But I was in the office in about 1999 or maybe 1998 when the phone rang, and it was Ram Gokul. There's Ram Gokul up there. I want to get the pointer without deleting everything. No, the pointer. And he said, Martin, we're setting up a PD Academy, me, Edwina, and Simon. Would you like to come and join us? And I said, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. So I went along and joined these three presidents of the International Society of Peritoneal Dialysis, as well as joining the Holy Trinity or something of that sort. And so I spent the next 25 years in Bute with them, doing regular teaching. And so the first thing to say is it was sustainable. That's the PD Academy that's coming up in November this year. We were teaching 2 or 3 times a year. We went to lots of exotic locations in the UK, Brighton, I seem to remember, chips on Brighton Pier. And give some pictures. In the rain, chips on Brighton Pier in the rain, yes, that's true. And I've got some pictures at the bottom because I just want to draw your attention to a couple of things. People who came, Elaine Bowes came with a few cans, and they said, I think maybe we should learn how to place peritoneal dialysis catheters. Most of you will know Elaine Bowes. She's a really dynamic and articulate nurse. She's now placed more than 1,000 PE catheters. So things happened as a consequence. Not only that, we also started to develop a clinical study group, which was kind of coming from a discussion. I put the crucible up there because this was really a crucible for us. If you meet on a regular basis and present evidence and think about it and think about questions and talk about it, you start to develop a community of practice. Ram Gokul used to call it GobSat in those days. The evidence was good old boys sitting around talking. That's what the evidence was in those days. And through a community of practice, it was possible to start thinking about how to understand those questions better. On the left-hand side, we've got some of the young people. After one of the meetings we had in Sheffield, we had several of these clinical study group meetings in Sheffield in which work was presented, and people came and talked, and we learned and we shared, and that was so useful. So that's my kind of analogy. At one point, both Mark and I were co-chairing the CSG, and I thought we'd put us in our kilts to show that we're part of the Scottish diaspora. There are others among us too. James Following, I think, is from the Scottish diaspora too. But, you never know who you're sitting next to. Okay, so that's slide number 1. I've only got 11 of these, so if you want to shut me up, just shut me up. So the next one is this. I was sitting there thinking, there are lots of paradoxes in peritoneal dialysis, things that I don't understand. So maybe I went to that guy, Peter Blake, who's sitting there in the front. There he is, Peter. People don't know who you are. He was the editor of Peritoneal Dialysis International. And I said to Peter, how about a clinical case series in which we talk about challenging cases? Peter wrote back to me and said, you've got yourself a job. By which I realised I was probably a complete mug, actually, because it became quite difficult to get those cases and to get people to write them and all that sort of stuff. But it only came from sitting in those PD academies and thinking about stuff, thinking what kind of things should we be talking about. And so, by getting involved, and ultimately I became editor of PDI for about 8 years or something, and by getting involved in the literature and really trying to understand it and share it and talk about it, leading to the development of guidelines, of course, which come out of that evidence. And many of the group got involved in guideline development. An early one was Graham and Edwina talking about encapsulated peritoneal sclerosis, a very important topic, and others joined that too, and so on. Many other guidelines which are very important. So occasionally we had to take a trip, as nephrologists do. That's we went to Toronto, of course, to have a meeting with the publisher, and and had dinner with Jeff Crowell, who's now the editor-in-chief. It all sounds a little bit incestuous, doesn't it, still? We got locked outside someone's house in the snow, and I had to use my Bentley credit card to jam the lock to get back in again, but we managed to do that anyway, and that was about midnight, wasn't it? But still.
Joanne Bartman's house.
Yeah, I was going to say, if Joanne Bartman's house, Joanne was away, immediately the alarm rang to her, she was somewhere like South Africa. Someone was thrown in my house and all that stuff, the police were called, but thankfully we got in by that point. You know what can happen if you're on someone's front lawn somewhere in North America and you shouldn't be. We could have all finished there, but it didn't. It was all fine. Oh, yeah, I don't know if you've read this. Anne Patchett, one of my favourite authors. I was reading a short story by her the other day, so you can read that for yourselves. Line says, dogs can't read. Charlie Brown says, well, he's sitting there holding a book, sleepy in his chair. There's no way in the world that Anna Karenina and Count Vronsky could ever have been happy. I know, it sounds a bit intellectual, but actually it's got a lot to it. It's got a lot to it, you know, without actually getting into the reading, we go nowhere. So you talked about the PDOT study, but I want to draw people out. So here we've got Louise Dunn. Louise isn't in the room. Louise, are you here? She's one of a number of people who've been with us through the story, helping us to deliver the work. And Louise is embracing the first box of patient questionnaires that came with PDOTs when PDOTs came to the UK to open that study, and it was now to send it out to all of the participating sites. And so that's just to tell you the way that PDOTs came to the UK. Of course, Simon was strategic in setting up PDOTs, as Mark has told you, but we were able to collaborate that with another study and do two studies together, and that was a great opportunity. And I'll tell you more about Louise, how we got hold of her later in a slide or two. But you talked about, you showed some of the slides, I think some of the things which are most impactful to me from PDOTs, that was the design, which was again very thoughtful, were things like this paper, which you were very modest about, Mark. This shows that although the UK is dreadful, one thing it's very good at is that if you're a PD patient, your most likely outcome is that you'll get transplanted, or you're more likely to get transplanted than in any other country. I'm not sure, is transplantation more likely than death? Someone tell me.
Yes.
Yes, yeah, so good. It's good, isn't it? It's a good thing. Whereas with all the other PDOT study countries, that's something which we're doing very well. There were many other things. I think learning about variation in outcomes of peritonitis. I remember standing up at a UK Kidney Association, called Renal Association talk, and saying, I think it's reasonable to use gentamicin, and someone said to me, I think you should be executed. We were on the podium together, they were using the microphone. I was thinking, how do you want to execute me? You know, there are a number of methods available. But this shows actually that using aminoglycosides is a very useful and reasonable thing to do appropriately. So it's really nice to come away from the GOGSAT and come through to the evidence. So that's PDOTs. What's next? Well, I want to roll back a little bit. Bainbridge was very influential, I think, in Simon's thinking about volume, and of course in relation to icodextrin. But he was also influential to me, because the only reason why I got into peritoneal dialysis was because of this molecule here on the left, icodextrin. I was a registrar at the London Hospital, and there was a study called the Midas study, which was a game changer, it has to be said. I mean, it took about 12 years in the United States, having repeated the study, being the results, but still, it was a game changer. It was a randomized controlled trial that showed that icodextrin had an impact on artery filtration. And I was involved in recruiting patients to it. And so when I came up to Sheffield, there was quite a lot of icodextrin swelling around, and we were able to do a little bit of stuff and think about it, and think about combined solutions with Sarah Jenkins. And I went to a conference to talk about this, and the bloke next to me said, oh yeah, I'd like to introduce myself to you. My name is Bengt Rutter, and would you like to come to my university and spend a few days with me? Which I did. So that was inspiring, actually, very, very inspiring, and I know that he's influenced a lot in our thinking over the years. But Simon, of course, took the baton of volume and explored it thoroughly as randomized controlled trials, taking it to the next level, as Simon did do, as Simon would do, and that's the way he is. But he shared his experience with us, and we were able to be citing one of the bioelectrical impedance studies, for example, and allowed us to participate and contribute, which we really enjoyed. So what about the membrane? So you've talked about the membrane. I love the proteomics of the membrane, because honestly, when we first had some proteomics in the lab, I thought to myself, I mean, just take a look at it. It's just loads of blobs on the screen, isn't it? It really is. But somehow or other, they managed to use some data mining techniques and come out with some molecules that might or might not be relevant. But there were a few things that came out of this which are really, really important. And they tell us about strategic thinking. First of all, there were some samples left over from that global fluid study, and they were able to be used encapsulating peritoneal sclerosis patients with controls. Very, very precious, but to have that was amazing. It allowed a number of molecules to be identified that were more prominent in those of encapsulating peritoneal sclerosis. So that's one thing. The second thing was, I mentioned to you Louise Dunn. The reason why I got Louise Dunn is because when we were really worried about encapsulating peritoneal sclerosis, we decided to set up a registry. My wife was saying, I'm talking too fast. I'm talking too fast? No, okay, fine. All right, give it a pass. We'll talk faster. We decided we would set up a registry, and we got some money called the Kenyon Gilson Fund. Someone gave bequeathed some money, so we said we'll have a coordinator. And Angela Summers and I had to appoint a coordinator. Only one person came to the interview, that was Louise Dunn. So she was our coordinator for the registry. The registry actually didn't do much, but parts of it went a long, long way. And one of them was that the registry involved using this database that James Chess had developed, which was a PDDB, and Louise went around to many sites in the UK getting them to use that, and we used it for a long time, and actually it was very helpful. But one way it was very helpful was it enabled the delivery of PD craft and bio-PD, and you said that PD craft contributed a large number. Actually, I looked at the paper, the GWAS paper. The UK contributed 2575 of the 2850 patients in that study. I mean, that's awesome, right? That came from the strategic thinking, starting with the registry, which didn't go anywhere, but with getting the message out of the units and setting up the mechanism and having a study which can be delivered in that sort of way. So there's something about the strategic thinking which is so important. And Simon constantly does that, actually, thinks ahead, and that's really what we need to be doing. Okay, what about this one? Well, this is Hilary Becker. Hilary Becker's not here. She's a decision scientist, and we got into working with Hilary Becker quite a long time ago now. But one thing that happened to me was that I got a little bit of money to have a day off a week. And instead of playing golf, which I'm really, really bad at, actually, you've seen Jacques Tati on this year's holiday, well, that's me on golf course. So I thought I'd try to think of a research question, and the thing that really interested me was around decision making, and we got involved in chatting to Hilary and so on. So we managed to get some Kidney Research UK money, and that was around developing this decision aid, the first decision aid. The first decision aid, it was. See how I did that? Inverted sentence like they do with Star Wars? No. Yorkshire Dialysis Decision Aid. And that was the first dialysis decision. At the time they came to publish it, people said, well, we're not really interested in decision aids and peritoneal dialysis. There's now been a systematic review of decision aids and peritoneal dialysis in modality choice. And so that's been something which has been evolving, of course. And when we were involved in the KDIGO controversy conference, and of course we used Peter Blake's document that he published with the different 6 stages of involving people in the modality selection. And we used that to design what we put in, looking at the different steps into that document. And I just want to come back to the PD Academy, because we were able to present that to the PD Academy and talk to it with the delegates and try to get their input. And so, in a way, it allowed us to bring it back and to get more input as we try to develop that. So, of course, decision science is central now to modality choice, and it was really nice to be involved in that and to be involved in the study. The outcome of the study was decision regret or something like that. I can't remember the outcome. It was decision something, tension or something like that. It's some scientific decision sciencey term anyway. Okay, so what's next? Well, the next thing was sitting in that PD Academy thinking, but we've got no idea how people put PD catheters in. We really don't. We really don't. So let's send out a survey. I didn't tell you about, I didn't introduce you to Janet Wild, but when I had the Holy Trilogy next to her, next to them was a lady, and that's Janet Wild, who was the clinical educator for Baxter when we started the PD Academy. And she did that with me. We sent out a survey, we got some idea about what types of access techniques might be being used across the UK. And the next step that happened was then we got a grant and got some money from HCLIP. We were able to get the renal registry to start collecting that information. And that led to a research question which showed us that the medical insertion techniques seem to be performing less well than the surgical. And so that led us into the peritoneal dialysis catheter study, the UK catheter study. And that was very thought-provoking. Am I running over time, Simon?
No, you're fine.
Fine, okay. Because I want to talk a little bit about this. you can see how complex. On the left, we've got the sequences of progressions, which is part of the Markov model that Mark alluded to. All the different complex components of that pathway. And actually, one of those meetings in Sheffield, we got stickies and posted them on the walls. I've got some pictures somewhere, but I couldn't find them, of the different components that might influence that. A lot of thinking went into that. And these are some of the people that helped us. Yvonne Jackson, who was a PD nurse, who became a research nurse. You can see Louise Darby sitting there. She's here. She worked with us through this, from Stoke, of course, and Louise Dunn and many others. And this study, in the end, comes out and gives us confidence that using the medical technique is a very reasonable thing to do. Actually, in this study, the event rate from being on PD to having an event was lower with the medical and the surgical technique. And that's very relevant during the pandemic, of course, when trying to get people into theatre was challenging, and for the future, to enable the growth of PD. Okay, something else I became interested in, which isn't peritoneal dialysis, but it comes through indirectly. Because thinking about it, in peritoneal dialysis, we like teaching people to do tasks. So why do we teach people who dialyse and centre to do tasks? And of course, that's something that we became very interested in, because we wanted to support and enable people, and that was our shared hemodialysis care programme. And there's Tanya Barnes and Andy Henry, who's a patient. And it's delivered through a breakthrough series collaborative research, the randomised controlled trial, which we did collaboratively with Stoke, and actually it showed a secondary outcome measure, an increase in people either dialyzing independently or go home if you use that intervention. Now, what else have we not covered? You didn't mention SONG. SONG is now a very large international collaboration coming out of the University of Sydney, but many of us have had opportunities to participate in different aspects of that. And people sometimes say that we don't really understand what matters to patients. Well, SONG has had a really good crack at understanding what matters to patients. There are several hundreds of patients who are involved in systematically trying to talk about and articulate what outcomes matter to them alongside healthcare professionals. And of course, we've all attended various meetings where we've been involved in discussion. There's Helen Hurst in Vancouver standing up on the right. There's Simon from that meeting too, with Corinne Monero, who was the first author. But the outcomes that came that were important, and in a sense support was the work that Simon's been doing has been sort of around infection, around mortality, technique survival, which links of course to the membrane in many ways as well as survival, and this term of life participation. And the next step then of course was to develop a measure of life participation, which is currently ongoing. But they came up with some very interesting aspects, such as what matters to healthcare professionals and what matters to patients. And you can see the difference in these slides being presented. So, interestingly, fluid favoured much more by healthcare professionals than patients. On the other hand, fatigue, much more important to patients than to healthcare professionals. It's important to know these differences. And then, of course, there's the biotech companies, which we've been working with alongside. And they've been very important too, because progress is iterative. As you say, small steps take us further forward. And one of the things which really interested us was the microbiosensor system for accurately measuring PDF or white cell count real time within a minute or so. And that's a company from Manchester. And they're quite successful with sharing that now, and certainly our nurses find it very useful, either when they're out in the community to make sure that they've excluded peritonitis, or when a patient comes in centre, we can tell them instantly that the count's low, they don't need to worry, and then they can go on their way rather than sitting around waiting for a count from the lab. And it turns out to be more accurate than a count from the lab. And of course, then we've been working collaboratively with the company in Sweden, Triomed, thinking about steady concentration peritoneal dialysis. But overall, the thing that's been keeping us going has been Simon, and meetings such as EuroPD, which you and your colleagues have organised on a regular basis and invited us to. We've come along and we've tried to think very hard about how we should try to look intelligent in the forum. And we've met with our colleagues and we've had stimulating conversations such as we had in Bruges in November. And of course there's James Following, who's been very much involved in the work that we've been doing the intellectual behind the scenes, working out and doing the stats and the health economics, and he's very much involved in Intercept. And there he is presenting cost effectiveness of Intercept at EuroPD in Bruges. This is from the UK Renal Registry, a paper with Matt Taberner, who's here, and it just shows you the inequality in terms of ethnicity for home dialysis. I won't explain it to you more, but just to say there's a lot to go, a lot to be done for our therapies to be equally available to all. Looking at this group here, so a lot of very eminent people here. I want to draw attention to our nurses. That's Lucy and that's Zoe. Why are they so important? Well, they keep the show on the road. They really deliver the service. And one of the great things about these PD meetings is that we've brought our whole teams to them, and that's encouraged them to be excited about contributing to research, and we've learned what matters from their point of view. So that team working has been so essential. Okay, my final slide. So now, son, Dominic Davies, who's an academic too in a different area. I'm going to come to that in a minute. First of all, you all knew what Drag Us Back was, of course. We go past it when we go to Stoke in Sheffield, or Sheffield in Stoke. And, in fact, when we passed it today, James, it looked very much like a Drag Us Back, didn't it? Everybody did. So it's kind of a rocky bit of a mountain. And of course, nephrologists love to spend their time flying around the world. Edwina does quite a lot of that, don't you? So we love travel, don't we? But I was really struck by a sentence in your book, Don, about what travel means to some people. So to us, travel is an exotic thing we really aspire to, but for many people, they have to spend a lot of time travelling for their daily life, either in their commutes, in their work in some way. It's a huge burden, or even, as you say, to collect water for some people. And that's true for our centre-based hemodialysis patients too. And you can see, I just did the maths. I found a health economic paper from 2022 published in Peritoneal Dialysis International from the UK, so it must be good quality. The amount they allocated per individual for transport for centre-based hemodialysis was 8,491. If you multiply that by the prevalent number of centre-based hemodialysis patients in the UK of 24563, you get £208.5 million a year spent on travelling to the dialysis centres. To think nothing of the time that represents, the carbon it represents, surely we could spend that money better. After all, people really would prefer, on the whole, to be at home. And there's my little analogy of home, right?
Alexa, turn family room. Alexa, turn Dyson off. Alexa.
Anyway, Alexa, that's her Radio 3. Right, okay. So finally, my final slide is just to say thank you to patients, participants, colleagues, collaborators, inspirers, funders, and of course to Simon Davis. We've had a ball these last 25 years, and I have to say I never regret a moment picking up the phone and saying, yes, okay, I'll come along too and get stuck in. So thanks for listening.
You covered a lot.